Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today I want to show you something pretty surprising. Now, this tier list is going to look super familiar to you guys, but you're going to look at it and you're going to think, well, yeah, but there's something missing. There's something wrong with this tier list over here, and you'd be absolutely right. I want to make a really emphasized strong point. So I took the regular tier list, I took the latest one that I did, the 4.8 update from Captain Marvel, and I deleted all of the heroes. So you are looking at the full list of all of the villains in Marvel Future Fight. And I've also included, just for the generosity inside my heart, I've included characters that have uniforms that turn them into heroes, i.e. Venom into Anti-Venom, so technically with the uniform he shouldn't be on this list. And then also characters like Beast, who are heroes who turn into villains with their uniforms. So again, with or without the uniform, they should or shouldn't be on this list. And same goes for Red Hulk. And I've also included Destroyer, who's not a villain or a hero. He is the only neutral character. And this is the essence of what I want to talk about today, the complete lack of villains in Marvel Future Fight. And to illustrate this point a little bit more, in case you're still unconvinced, for those of you in the audience, I can see your skeptical faces, let me hit you with a couple of stats. Stats, numbers, that's right. I stayed up all night punching these numbers for you guys. So there are, in total, on this list, of course you have to minus a few for the ones that I mentioned, but this entire list of the most comprehensive amount of villains in Marvel Future Fight is 58 characters. There are 184 characters in Marvel Future Fight. That means that, to date, we have less than 32% of the characters in Marvel Future Fight as villains. It's down to 31.5%. This is one of the lowest numbers it has ever been in the game, which is absolutely insane. And this number comes on the back of having multiple updates where we had two villains. We just got Korath and Minerva and a uniform for Ronan, but he was still in the game. And then the update before that, we got both Doctor Doom and Victorious. And they still can't manage to give us enough villains. On top of that, and the reason why I wanted to specifically use the tier list to illustrate my point, if you take a look at the rare and below, these last four tiers, you see that the majority of the names are on that side of the map. In fact, 36 out of the 58 characters are in the rare tier and below. Now, of course, I understand that my tier list is my personal opinion, so the devs at Netmarble, other players may disagree with me and think that a lot of these villains are much better. However, just taking my opinion and the thoughts of you guys, because the majority of you not only enjoyed seeing the list but also agreed with it in general, would say that it means more than 60%, 62% of the villains that we have, so more than half of the 31% of the villains in Marvel Future Fight are just complete trash or just barely usable in the majority of game modes. Probably the only one on this list who qualifies beyond barely usable is like Pimtron and Killmonger in certain situations. But beyond that, I mean, and don't even get me started. There are multiple paywall characters in here as well. I mean, this also blows my mind in terms of actual bio-sub characters. You've got Venom, or sorry, not Venom, Ghost. You've got Enchantress here as well. You've got Sentinel. You've got, I already mentioned Killmonger, Carnage. There's, like, it actually is quite odd to me that there are so many villains featured as payable characters, and they're so bad. They're so bad. There's 5 characters in the Mythic tier. There's like 6 or 7 in the Legendary tier. There's like less than 15 characters that are actually top tier and villains in Marvel Future Fight. It's such a small list, and I honestly, the thing that makes this video frustrating to make is that I don't have a reason for you. I don't have an explanation for why Marvel Future Fight and why the devs are allergic to villains. Even the villains that they've given us, they don't know how to make them good. They either are afraid of making them powerful because, I don't know, some babies are gonna cry that they're actually being bullied by villains rather than being bullied by heroes. I don't know. Or they just don't care and they just want the game to be dominated by hero characters. But I will say that it is kind of disappointing, and I don't know if I speak for everyone, but I will speak for myself when I say that I really wish this wasn't the case, and I really wish that, I mean, I wish we had more villains, but at the very least, I wish more of the villains were good. Now, I understand that you can't make all of the villains suddenly, you can't just push them all into the mythic, heroic, and legendary tier, because that would completely imbalance things, because I still have to put all of the heroes back. Think about that. I get that. But the fact that more than half of them are here really blows my mind. And even though, I mean, some of the gaps I covered up, so there are actually more missing gaps than you see, but just looking at the numbers and doing the math, that means that more heroes are on this side of the map than this side, even though they make up the majority. So think about that. Even though there are more heroes in the game than villains, i.e. more chances, more opportunities for Netmarble to make a bad character or just never rework a character, which we know that they are pretty slow at doing, they still manage to make the heroes more OP on average than villains. And I don't have kind of hard stats to show you on average the power level of your typical hero versus villain, but I can see just by the eye test, looking at this list that I've come up with and looking at so many names here. I mean, there's probably just as many heroes on this side as villains, so that would tie them. But then because heroes make up 2/3 of the game, more than 60%, or just under 60%, no, over 60%, almost 70%. What am I saying? Yeah, like 68%. That means that the other, 38% are going to be on this side. So there really is a really huge imbalance between the level of good characters that are heroes and the level of good characters that are villains. And it actually even goes beyond that, because then you look at things like passive buffs. Characters like Nick Fury, characters like White Fox, characters like Coulson and Valkyrie and Ghost Panther. All of these characters do the same thing. They increase the damage to supervillains and they decrease damage coming from supervillains. Now, I understand that this is primarily done to develop PvE game modes, i.e. World Boss and World Boss Ultimate, possibly Alliance Raid, Shadowland, most Shadowland, or half of the Shadowland, actually not really Shadowland. I think the majority of Shadowland stages are hero stages. So World Boss and Alliance Battle Extreme, and more recently Giant Boss Raid. But that really leaves us with a lot missing here, because there's plenty of PvP modes, Alliance Tournament, Alliance Conquest, Timeline Battle, where you have to fight against heroes. There's plenty of story missions where you have to fight against heroes, and there are very few, there's basically no buffs against heroes that apply to the entire team. There are buffs that individual characters have to make them stronger against heroes. Corvus has increased damage dealt to superhero types by 15%. Thanos has, where's Thanos? Where are you, buddy? You're hiding from me. Thanos has 50%, or sorry, 30% decreased damage received from superhero types. So it exists, but these are just self-buffs. These are not buffs that apply to the entire team. And so it's really written everywhere in the design of the characters that Netmarble has, such a reverence and such high regard for hero characters and such low regard and basically no care whatsoever for villains. So I really don't know how to really go from there and what really to say. Fix them. I mean, it's pretty obvious. Do the things that you're doing for hero characters for villains. And there's a couple of things they can do to encourage themselves to do that. They can introduce new aspects of Alliance Battle that have heroes instead of villains. Why is it a Frost Beast all the time? You can make it some sort of hero character, like the Shield Helicarrier, for example. I know that's kind of a dumb example. You don't want to fight a giant ship for 3 minutes, but that's an example. You could fight White Galactus or something like that. As far as World Boss, we already have a few hero stages. We have 3 out of 10, which is only 30%, but that's better than nothing. But they can introduce more hero stages, whether they're mutants or otherwise. Adam Warlock could be a hero World Boss stage, and he could get a uniform and a rework. Odin as well could be as well. And Odin is kind of a World Boss, a mini World Boss for new players who are trying to get past Chapter 12.8 to get the CTP of energy and get those finishing rewards for the story mission. But beyond that, you really put away most of the hero enemies once you move on in the game. And basically the only time that you fight hero enemies is in Alliance Conquest, when you fight against real people, and in Timeline Battle when you fight against real people. And the majority of teams feature 2 or 3 heroes on every single team, and that's not a surprise because they make up 2/3 of the game. So it would just naturally tend towards having more and I've already said the majority of heroes are probably better than the majority of villains. And so, yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to change. I guess what I'm saying is that it could stay the same, but as someone who really enjoys villains, as someone who wants to see more of a counterplay between heroes and villains, I think it's a really kind of oddly underdeveloped theme in Marvel Future Fight. And although they created the tags for superhero and for supervillain, the sides, they don't really come to utilize them very much. I mean, there are plenty of uniforms you can think of off the top of your head. One glaringly obvious example is Captain America's Secret Empire. I know that he ends up being a hero at the very end of it, and it's brainwashing and all blah blah blah. But for the vast majority of it, he's a villain. So and of course he's not a villain in this game. When you equip the uniform, he stays as a hero, and there's plenty of other characters who have villain-esque uniforms and do not become villains. So yeah, I mean, the best possible result to this would be Netmarble actually responding, whether they responded on Twitter or they responded on their new Netmarble forums, and they just basically let out sort of a developer's note and said, hey guys, this is why we tend to focus on heroes instead of villains. Possibly they could have a poll, and that would probably be a really cool way of seeing if I'm completely misreading the room and the majority of the community doesn't give a shit about villains and they're happy with heroes being super dominant. Or maybe I am right and people want to see more characters like Minerva, like Korath, who are dominant villains like Thanos, Strife, etc. So I wanted to point this out. I wanted to air some of my grievances, go on a little mini rant, because it's something that is pretty much just constantly there. I don't want to talk about it day in and day out because it gets annoying, but once in a while I do want to slam on the door and really give some visual representation, some numbers to back it up, to show how like insanely imbalanced it is. And listen, I know it's never going to be completely balanced. I know other Marvel games and comic books in general, they want to illustrate the hero at the end of the day because, you know, it's all about the heroes. I understand that from a psychological point of view, and from a fan's point of view, you want to, I mean, some people identify with villains, but still, you want to identify with the hero at the end of the day. So I understand that there's always going to be an imbalance, and that's okay, but an imbalance of, you know, this proportion, 68% versus 32%, and then more than half of those 32% of villains are complete dog shit. Like, if you look at my tier 1 characters, there's no doubt that, you know, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 villains. I only have what, 8? I only have 10. I only have 10 untiered 2 characters, and 4 of them just so happen to be villains. So that's already 40%, which is above the norm of 30% for villains. It's already 10% over. And the majority of villains that I did tier 2 are universal types that I did for Valor, like the native tier 2 Black Order and stuff like that. If you take those off the list, it gets skewed even more. So I wanted to bring this up to you guys. More than that, I also want to hear from you. What do you really think? Be honest with me. If you don't agree with me, say so. If you do, say so and why. And if you don't, of course, also why. Hit me up down below in the comments. Subscribe if you enjoy the content. And of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you again tomorrow. Take care.